Welcome everyone, welcome to Sunday, and welcome to the other part of the changes to patch 10.0.5. The other part of the changes is the balance tuning, the buffs, the nerfs and the fixes to the talent trees to quite a few specs. So this is what we have in store for today. The focus for today is going to be on Druid, on Mistweaver Monk, some Evoker and some Paladin in the way. Of course, we can't miss the typical wall of text of Priest that can never be missing from these type of changes, and then Warlocks and Warrior as well. So I am here to give you the TLDR of the biggest and most important of the changes that are happening in patch 10.0.5 to these specs. Of course, if you want to find out all of the tiniest minute details and what it could mean in depth, in detail to each and every one of these specs, there are of course way more knowledgeable players you can go and check out for each and every one of these specs. But this is more of a general look for everything that is changing, condensed into one video. Starting with Druid. So Druid has a whole bunch of changes to the general tree. Now, all of this that you are seeing has a couple of important changes, like for example that all Druids now learn swipe at level 10. It's no longer going to have to cost a talent, and also, unfortunately for Feral in particular, swipe and brutal slash damage is reduced by 50%. Most of the other stuff is not very important. What is only important after you see this wall of text, especially if you're a Druid, if you're a Resto Druid even more so, but Balance Druid as well, is frantically scrolling down all of these notes and trying to see if there has been any change to your interrupt, to your Skull Bash. So we are changing the general tree of Druid. Is this thing still in effect? Do we still have to pay 6 talent points to be able to reach Skull Bash? Well, fine, you have to spend 5 now, because Killer Instinct has now been condensed into a 2 talent point instead of a 3 talent point talent. So I guess something changed. I guess now you have 1 more talent, you have 1 more free talent to spend, because if you wanted to get to this interrupt now, in the upcoming patch, it's going to cost you 1 less talent to actually get there. But besides that, most of the general tree of Druid isn't really changing drastically, and it's not what it's important for the changes of Druid. The more important changes are to the specs themselves. So let's start with Restoration Druid, and this is done for Restoration Druid. So let's move on to Balance Druid. The main changes to Balance Druid are thus: Lunar Eclipse no longer increases the crit chance of Starfire. Instead, it is going to increase the damage Starfire deals to nearby enemies by 50%. So now it's more of a beefy splash AoE type of damaging abilities, more so than having more crit. This perhaps was made so because at some times it was even more worth to simply spam Starfire even on single target, even above Wrath, which is technically supposed to be your single target ability. So with this change, it's kind of guaranteeing that Wrath goes back to being a single target ability, and Starfire, since now the only benefit it gains into Eclipse is to just do more AoE damage, so it's very likely that now that is the use Starfire will have. However, there is an even bigger change. Circle of Life and Death has been removed, and it has been replaced by something quite similar. Cosmic Rapidity, your Moonfire, Sunfire and Stellar Flare now deal damage 13 to 25% faster. Now, if you are confused and if you think this is kind of sounds the same as Circle of Life and Death, it's an easy mistake to make, because Circle of Life and Death actually told you that your dots were doing damage in 25% less time. So yes, they were ticking faster, but they were ticking faster because their duration was also shorter. So yes, you had the benefit of doing more damage, but you also have the deficit of having to recast your dots way more often, because this talent was making them expire effectively 25% faster. So this reworked Circle of Life and Death, now named Cosmic Rapidity, is basically taking away the part where the dots are going to end up earlier and just keeping the damage only. That's the main positive change that the Balance Druid tuning receives in patch 10.0.5. We then have Guardian Druid. Amongst the positive ones is that Ursine Adept, the one that made you cast a whole bunch of things in bear form, by default is now also baseline, so you don't have to spend a talent for this either. Amongst the changes, what stands out is the couple of new abilities available to you. Hooray for Guardian Druid having more buttons, although this one is a cooldown, so technically not a button you will be using often. Lunar Beam. So playing even more heavily on the right side of the tree for Guardian, you know, the Space Bear, the Laser Bear build of Guardian. Now this is an actual cooldown, your finishing cooldown for your Laser Bear build, and also Raise. This is kind of the replacement, the pseudo replacement of Swipe after Swipe got nerfed, as we mentioned, by 50%. This is the new AoE damage ability for Guardian. It has a few issues. Yes, it does way more damage than Swipe, but unfortunately this one costs 40 rage. Also, unfortunately, this talent has no synergy, no extra features in the talent tree at the moment. So you have no ways to make this one cost less rage. It doesn't work with Tooth and Claw, so you have no chances to make this free in any way. So you do have to pay the full price of the 40 rage if you actually want to use this in AoE situations. What is perhaps much better, and a much better piece of news for Guardian Druid, is the ease of playing around with your end talents, because this is the current Guardian Druid. As you can see, you are pretty much forced into 3 different talents if you want to enter the last bracket of your finishing talents, especially your 2 sides. Your Berserk empowerments are basically splitting completely from the rest. As you can see, if you go down the left, you can't go back into the middle talents. If you go down the right, you can't go back into the middle. You are completely blocked off once you choose to go down that route. The new talents, as you can see, are much more versatile. They allow you to just freely move from the left side to the middle or from the right side to the middle. So you don't have to basically lock yourself into a choice when you start going down one of the 2 sides. That is perhaps the biggest and more positive of the changes for Guardian Druid. The last of the Druid specs to be changed being Feral. Feral has received the least amount of changes compared to the other 2 specs in terms of how much they can impact them. Blizzard pointed out in one of their comments that they wanted to give you a few other ways to do AoE rather than just spamming Primal Wrath over and over. So they are saying that they are putting a bit more power into your Ferocious Bite, splash damage as a source of your AoE as a Feral Druid, as well as giving you back the option of Lunar Inspiration, buffing it by a whopping 66% and bringing it all the way down to the bottom of the tree as a choice talent with Feral Frenzy. The reasoning from Blizzard was that we kind of always wanted this to be an extra option, but because it adds an extra button, Moonfire, to your rotation, it becomes harder to control, and because it's harder, it kind of needs to be justified by doing way more damage. So for us, it was difficult to balance. So what we have chosen to do now is we're putting all the way to the bottom of the tree as a choice node, and if you want to go that deep, that far down to take this talent, then you can be rewarded by the talent itself being significantly buffed in patch 10.0.5. That is the main change that Feral is about to receive in patch 10.0.5. Talking about main changes and about to be received is Preservation Evoker getting changed, and by changed I mean nerfed, at the very least if we look at the way Preservation plays now. They are changing Temporal Anomaly, which has a 6-second cooldown, to have a 15-second cooldown. So very heavy change to the way this ability works, and it's quite hurtful to the way the spec plays right now. I don't have time to go in detail in the entire way you are supposed to play Preservation to those who don't, because it will be like speaking a foreign language. Just know that it's a pretty hurtful change. Yes, Temporal Anomaly itself is buffed in how much it heals. It can now heal more targets than just 6, but the way it was being used in the playstyle of Evoker, it is definitely a nerf. Which I should say, as a Preservation Evoker myself, it is warranted when it comes to the raid and when it comes to the HPS you can have in the raid. Moving on, we have Marksmanship Hunter, the only of the hunters getting changed. Surprisingly, no real changes to Beast Mastery, but more surprisingly, no changes to Survival. Not into good of a spot right now. The main change to Marksmanship especially is that Double Tap has been removed and has been replaced by Tactical Reload, which is a very simple, very straightforward aim shot, and Rapid Fire have a 10% cooldown reduction. Now, Double Tap is sometimes hurtful in PvE for your initial burst, but it is definitely way more hurtful, at the very least I'm told, when it comes to PvP compared to the effectiveness it had in PvE. That is definitely the standout change that Marksmanship is receiving in patch 10.0.5. We then have perhaps the coolest of the changes. I'm not sure if it's gonna be the strongest, but for sure is the coolest. Now, you see this entire wall of text. Now, basically, almost all of this is concentrated into those two things right there. Because those two things right there used to be Bone Dust Brew, Attenuation, and then the power-up of Bone Dust Brew, Bountiful Brew. These talents are gone. These talents are replaced by Shaylon's Gift and then a choice node between Veil of Pride and Shauhao's Lesson. Shaylon's Gift is very simply, you spawn a cloud of mist every 8 seconds, and when you actually use Shaylon's Gift, you draw in those clouds to heal 3 players per cloud consumed. So, very simple, right? You wait 8 seconds, you use the ability, you draw in 1 cloud and you heal 3 players. You wait 16 seconds, you draw in 2 clouds and you heal 6 players, etc, etc. The talent choice node after is between Veil of Pride, which will fasten the amount of time you need to wait for the clouds to spawn to 1 every 4 seconds instead of 1 every 8, so basically makes it 50% faster, or a much more flamboyant talent like Shauhao's Lesson. For every time you cast Shaylon's Gift, you learn one of Shauhao's lessons for up to 30 seconds based on how many clouds of mists are consumed. So, the more the clouds you suck in, the more of these you will benefit from. You have the lessons of doubt, despair, fear, and anger, giving you 4 different types of buffs for yourself. I think this is, as I said, the coolest set of changes. Bountiful Brew was quite the repetitive and sort of automatic autoplay type of button you had as a Mistweaver Monk, plus it was reused from Shadowlands, whereas this one is completely new from Dragonflight itself. I think it's quite cool and quite flavorful for Monk to be playing around. The whole of the, the Sha, the Pandaria themed setting for Monk, I think it's quite nice for Mistweaver. Maybe it's garbage and will be completely unplayable, but at the very least props for the imagination of these talent choices. When it comes to Paladin, there is only one spec being changed, and that's Holy. This is massive, possibly massive because of the amount of change it can put to the spec. Avenging Crusader, so one of your choice nodes as a Holy Paladin, now costs 5 Holy Power instead of mana, and it has a cooldown reduced to 45 seconds instead of a 2-minute cooldown. And by result, the duration is also reduced to 12 seconds instead of 20. So it makes Paladin be able to have a much shorter cooldown, to have much shorter burst windows, rather than having to rely on a much longer Wings, a much longer Avenging Wrath cooldown of 2 minutes. And then perhaps an extra help if you were playing with the Blessings talent, that Blessing of Winter now gives more help to your healers, or I should say to your healer, because it's just one healer being buffed by this one, giving them 15% mana back over the duration of the 30-second buff of Blessing of Winter, which is an okay buff. It is still weaker than things like Manatite Totem or things like Innervate or things like Symbol of Hope when used on your healer's mana being quite low, but besides those 3, it's basically the next best thing for mana regeneration when it comes to combat. We then move on to the typical set of changes to Priest. At the very least, now the class changes to Priest, and even the Holy Priest and the Shadow Priest changes are not that big. No, of course, no. If you were hoping for the interrupt being added to Priest specs, to Holy and to Discipline, no, stop, it's not happening. Those are not the changes. Most of the changes are happening to Discipline instead. So it's a very big set of changes, although not much is changing, if it makes any sense. Most of these are tiny numbers tuning, like Light's Wrath costs 2% of your base mana, or Mind Blast costs 1.6% of your base mana instead of 2.5%. Okay, so nothing really groundbreaking. There has been a couple of important changes for Discipline, like the fact that now Power Word Solace is now being added to the functionality and the synergy of many other talents, like for example Train of Thought, Blaze of Light, Will and Woe, Wrath Unleashed are all talents that previously did not include Power Word Solace in their benefits. It was mostly just about Smite, sometimes about Mind Blast as well, but not Power Word Solace. Now Power Word Solace is part of the gang as well for Discipline Priest. That is perhaps the biggest and most powerful of the changes, especially with Harsh Discipline, to get your freebie casts of Penance, also now being helped by Power Word Solace. So for once we have a misleading wall of text for Priest. Yes, the wall of text is still there, but there is not too much of importance when it comes to Priest. Now, talking about wall of texts, here is where we don't have a wall of text. Here comes Shaman. and here Shaman leaves. On to the next one being Warlock. Well, there isn't actually much for Warlock besides the Soulkeeper redesign and the Inquisitor's Gaze now being much more simple to manage because it's just passive, it just happens on the background. The main change is to Affliction, and the bigger change to Affliction is that Focus Malignancy, your star conduit if you were Affliction from Shadowlands, buffing your bigger ability, buffing your Malefic Rapture damage for a single target, is now coming back as a talent. That's basically the main and biggest change that Warlock is receiving, at the very least so far in patch 10.0.5. Same goes for Warrior. If you were expecting further nerfs, for example, to Protection, you would be wrong. There is nothing for Protection Warrior in 10.0.5. There is also nothing for Fury, although Fury is doing considerably better than Arms and shouldn't be expecting any changes. If anything, perhaps Fury Warriors might have feared for some nerfs, but nope, nothing for Fury either. The main changes are to Arms instead. There is an attempt, I'm assuming it's gonna fail, to make Slam more relevant. Slam has a 10% increased chance to crit and deals 30% increased crit damage for Arms. More chances for Battlelord to reset the cooldown of Mortar Strike or Cleave by 35%. Previously it was 25%. Skull Splitter, this is an interesting one. Skull Splitter now causes deep wounds to expire instantly. So it's quite the extra burst chunk of damage by simply sucking in all of the deep wounds you were causing as an Arms Warrior, and more importantly, your pittance of an AoE as an Arms Warrior at the very least now is baseline, because Sweeping Strikes is now a baseline ability for all Arms Warriors in patch 10.0.5. As a result, for losing this talent, we get a new entry for Arms, Spiteful Serenity, Colossus Smash, and Avatar's duration are doubled. Wow, wait a second, that's huge. Hold on. But their damage bonuses are reduced by 50%. So double the duration for half the effectiveness as a talent for Arms Warriors. So with Warrior being done with, this is the entire list of changes planned so far for the next upcoming patch in Dragonflight. Now, we have seen quite a lot of things. As I said, you can probably check out things like class discourse to see a much more in-depth look and a much more in-depth number crunching of all of these changes for the specs. I was just here to list pretty much the more important ones, the more meaningful changes. As I said, there were quite a few big changes, not just in terms of numbers, not just in terms of buffs or nerfs, but actual talents being swapped around. Particularly Balanced Druid, Guardian Druid, as well as Mistweaver Monk were kind of standing out for how much they were getting changed in their talents. So with this out of the way, this is all we had to check for today. I will likely keep going on in these changes in detail, especially for a few more of the numbers getting tuned here and there on stream later today and even tomorrow, since it's quite the long list of changes. But for today, we can stop here as the video has gone on for long enough. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of my Patreon supporters for supporting and contributing to the growth of myself and this channel. You can still, as usual, support in other ways that don't include spending money. Liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself, are always appreciated ways to show your support. You can also help me by following me on Twitter. If you ever want to, for example, have a reminder of whenever I come live on stream, Twitter would be the right way to go. You can also support me by subscribing to my Patreon to get access to my Discord server as well. And lastly, you can find me streaming on Twitch at 10 p.m. European time zones, 1 p.m. Pacific, and 4 p.m. Eastern US time zones. With this out of the way, I am now leaving. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, I have to leave. I have to finish like 6 world quests in 22 minutes before the reset of Saturday. Yes, I am coming from the past on this video.